Step out of the vehicle. Now.
Officer, I haven't done anything wrong. Why am I being detained?
You're not asking questions tonight. Turn around.
I'm a doctor. These are my hands. You're hurting me.
Then you should have known better.
It was a suffocatingly humid Tuesday evening in September 2024 when Dr. Julianne Marcus was navigating the winding, tree-lined streets of the upscale Buckhead district in Atlanta, Georgia. She was 42 years old, a woman of poise and immense intellect, driving her charcoal gray Range Rover. She had just completed a grueling 20-hour shift at Emory University Hospital, where she had performed 2 emergency craniotomies. Her body was aching with a bone-deep fatigue, and her mind was focused solely on a hot bath and the leftover lasagna waiting in her refrigerator. Julianne was a law-abiding citizen in the truest sense. She was the type of person who set her cruise control to the exact speed limit and used her turn signals in empty parking lots. She had no reason to believe that her drive home would become the catalyst for a massive legal battle that would expose a rot within the Atlanta Police Department and result in a historic $5.5 million settlement. Before we delve deeper into this harrowing account, please tell us where you are watching from in the comments section below. And if you have not subscribed to the channel yet, please click that subscribe button now. This story uncovers truths that need to be heard. Julianne noticed the aggressive strobing of blue lights in her rearview mirror just as she turned onto West Pace's Ferry Road. She was confused but not panicked. She checked her dashboard. She was traveling 34 miles per hour in a 35 zone. Her registration was up to date, her insurance was premium, and her vehicle was in perfect mechanical condition. She pulled over smoothly onto a wide shoulder near a manicured hedge, turned off the engine, turned on the interior lights, and placed her hands at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel. This was a protocol her husband Thomas, a retired Drug Enforcement Administration agent with 20 years of field experience, had drilled into her. Thomas knew the streets, and he knew that for a black woman driving a luxury car in the South, compliance was a survival strategy. Officer Silas Graves exited his patrol vehicle. Graves was 34 years old with a buzz cut and a uniform that fit too tightly across his chest. He approached the Range Rover with his hand resting on the grip of his service weapon, a posture of combat rather than community service. What Julianne did not know was that Officer Graves had 22 sustained complaints in his personnel file over a 10-year career. 19 of those complaints alleged racial profiling or excessive force. In a functional system, Graves would have been fired years ago. But in a system protected by powerful unions and a culture of silence, he was still patrolling the streets looking for trouble. Graves reached the window but did not speak immediately. He shined his high-intensity flashlight directly into Julianne's eyes, blinding her temporarily. He let the silence hang for 15 uncomfortable seconds, a psychological tactic designed to induce nervousness. When he finally spoke, his voice was dripping with condescension. He asked for her license and registration. Julianne, blinking spots from her vision, calmly informed him that she needed to reach into her purse on the passenger seat. She moved slowly. She handed over the documents. Graves looked at the license, then at Julianne, who was still wearing her surgical scrubs, generic blue cotton that gave no hint of her status as one of the state's leading surgeons. Graves asked where she was coming from. Julianne replied that she was coming from the hospital. He asked if the car belonged to a patient. The question was absurd, insulting, and clearly rooted in bias. Julianne clarified that the car was hers. Graves then asked the question that revealed his true motivation, how she could afford to live in the neighborhood listed on her license. He saw a black woman in scrubs and assumed she was support staff, a nurse's aide, or a cleaner who had perhaps stolen the keys to a luxury vehicle. When Julianne corrected him, stating she was a neurosurgeon, Graves's ego took a hit. He didn't like being corrected. He ordered her out of the vehicle. Julianne asked for the reason for the stop. Graves told her that her vehicle fit the description of a car involved in a hit-and-run 3 miles away. This was a fabrication. There had been no hit-and-run reported in that sector for 48 hours. Julianne, remembering Thomas's advice, reached for her smartphone mounted on the dashboard to ensure it was recording. Graves shouted at her to stop moving. Julianne froze, explaining she was securing her phone. Graves yanked the door open, grabbed her by the arm, and pulled her out of the SUV. The asphalt was wet from a recent summer storm. "Turn around and face the vehicle," Graves barked. Julianne complied. He kicked her legs apart far wider than necessary. He pulled her arms behind her back and applied the handcuffs. He ratcheted them down until they clicked into the tightest setting. The metal bit into the delicate skin of her wrists that required absolute stability and precision to perform brain surgery. She winced and told him the cuffs were damaging her hands. Graves ignored her. He told her she was being detained for obstruction of justice and suspicion of grand theft auto. A second patrol car arrived. Officer Miles Thorne, a rookie who had been on the force for less than 6 months, stepped out. He watched as Graves began to search Julianne's pockets. Graves pulled out her hospital ID badge, her wallet, and a pager. He scoffed at the badge. Thorne walked closer, looking uncomfortable. He asked Graves what the probable cause was. Graves told him to shut up and watch the suspect. Graves then left Julianne standing in the humidity, handcuffed, while he went to search her vehicle. He had no warrant. He had no consent. He had no probable cause other than his own bias. Graves opened the driver's side door and began tossing items. He emptied the center console. He opened the glove box and threw her vehicle manual on the floor. He went to the back seat where her medical bag was located. This bag contained customized surgical loupes, magnifying glasses tailored to her eyes, costing $8,000, and sensitive patient files. Graves dumped the bag. The loupes tumbled onto the floor mat. He rifled through the files, a violation of HIPAA regulations, though he likely didn't know or care. Across the street, a man named Colonel Richard Henderson Retter was sitting on his porch. Henderson was a 60-year-old white man, a retired Marine Corps officer who ran a tight ship in his neighborhood. He saw the lights. He saw the way Graves manhandled the woman. He recognized Julianne. She had performed surgery on his wife's spine 2 years prior. Henderson pulled out his phone and began recording in 4K resolution. He walked down his driveway to the edge of the property line. Graves noticed him and shouted for him to retreat. Henderson, who had stared down combatants in foreign war zones, simply replied, "I am on my property, officer. I am documenting this encounter. Carry on." Graves returned to Julianne after 15 minutes of searching the car. He had found nothing illegal. No drugs, no stolen goods, no weapons, just medical equipment and the smell of antiseptic. He was frustrated. He stood inches from Julianne's face. He asked her if she had been drinking. She said no. He asked why her eyes were red. She explained she had been awake for 24 hours, saving lives. He accused her of being on narcotics. He told her that he could smell marijuana in the car, the universal lie used by corrupt officers to justify illegal searches. Julianne, who had never touched a drug in her life due to her profession, stared at him with cold fury. Officer Thorne, the rookie, approached Graves. Thorne whispered that the woman was a doctor at Emory and that her husband was listed in the database as a federal agent. Graves paused. His face went pale, then red with anger. He realized he had stepped into a trap of his own making, but his ego wouldn't let him back down. He couldn't arrest her. He had nothing. But he couldn't just apologize. That would be admitting defeat. So he uncuffed her roughly. He threw her license at her. He told her she was being let off with a warning, though he never specified what the warning was for. He got in his car and sped off, leaving Julianne standing by her ransacked vehicle with bleeding wrists. Julianne did not cry. She was a surgeon. She compartmentalized trauma for a living. She gathered her scattered belongings, checked her surgical loupes for damage, and drove the remaining mile to her home. When she walked through the door, Thomas was in the kitchen. He took one look at her face, saw the bruising on her wrists, and the formidable calm of the ex-DEA agent evaporated, replaced by a cold, calculating rage. He didn't shout. He sat her down, iced her wrists, and took high-resolution photographs of the injuries. He called Colonel Henderson, who sent over the video file immediately. Then Thomas called a number he hadn't used in years, the direct line to Marcus Sterling, the most feared civil rights attorney in Atlanta. The next morning, they sat in Sterling's glass-walled office. Sterling watched the video. He looked at the medical report detailing the nerve compression in Julianne's wrists, which would require her to take 3 weeks off from surgery, a loss of income, and a disservice to her patients. Sterling looked at Thomas. "We aren't just going to sue," Sterling said. "We are going to dismantle his career." They filed a federal lawsuit in the Northern District of Georgia alleging violation of the Fourth Amendment, false imprisonment, assault battery, and racial profiling. The damages sought were $10 million. The discovery process was brutal. The City of Atlanta's legal team tried to settle immediately for $50,000. Sterling laughed and hung up the phone. He demanded Officer Graves's entire disciplinary history. What he received was a roadmap of systemic failure. Data analysis of Graves's stops revealed a chilling statistic. While the demographic makeup of his patrol zone was 60% white and 30% black, 85% of Graves's traffic stops involved black drivers. Furthermore, according to the Bureau of Justice Statistics nationwide, black drivers are searched at rates nearly 3 times that of white drivers, despite white drivers being statistically more likely to be found with contraband. Graves's record was even worse than the national average. He searched 90% of the minorities he stopped and found contraband in less than 2% of those searches. The deposition of Officer Graves was the turning point. He sat across from Sterling, arrogant and dismissive. Sterling asked him why he stopped the vehicle. Graves claimed she was swerving. Sterling played the dashcam footage, which showed the Range Rover moving in a perfect straight line. Graves claimed he smelled marijuana. Sterling produced Julianne's toxicology report from that night. She had gone straight to the hospital to get tested after the stop, which was clean. Sterling then played Colonel Henderson's video. It showed Graves dumping the medical bag. Sterling asked Officer Graves, "Can you explain to me what probable cause you had to dump sterile surgical equipment onto a dirty floor mat?" Graves remained silent. He had no answer. The trial began 6 months later. The courtroom was packed. Julianne took the stand. She was articulate, professional, and heartbreaking. She described the fear of realizing that her years of education and service to the community meant nothing to a man with a badge who only saw her skin color. She described the pain in her hands, the hands she used to save lives as the cuffs cut into them. She described the humiliation. The jury, a diverse group of 12 Atlanta residents, listened intently. Then came the expert witnesses. A statistician from Georgia Tech testified about the impossibility of Graves's arrest record being random. He explained that the statistical probability of Graves stopping that many minority drivers by chance was less than 1 in a million. He presented the jury with hard numbers. In the United States, black people are arrested at a rate 5 times higher than white people for similar conduct. In Graves's district, that number was 7 times higher. The defense tried to argue that Graves worked in high-crime areas, but the data showed he mostly patrolled the affluent corridors hunting for people who didn't belong. Officer Thorne, the rookie, was called to the stand. He had since transferred to a different precinct. He testified that Graves had told him in the car before the stop, "Look at that Rover. I bet you $10 it's a drug dealer's girlfriend." This testimony was the nail in the coffin. It proved malice. It proved premeditation. It proved that the stop was never about traffic safety. It was about racial bias and a power trip. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. They returned a verdict that sent shockwaves through the city. They found Officer Graves and the Atlanta Police Department liable on all counts. They awarded Dr. Julianne Marcus $2.5 million in compensatory damages for her injuries, lost wages, and emotional distress. But they didn't stop there. To send a message that this behavior would no longer be tolerated, they awarded an additional $3 million in punitive damages. The total settlement was $5.5 million. The fallout was immediate. Officer Graves was fired within 24 hours of the verdict. The Georgia Peace Officer Standards and Training Council revoked his certification, ensuring he could never work in law enforcement again. The video of the stop, which was released after the trial, went viral, garnering 20 million views. It sparked protests and demanded policy changes. The Atlanta Police Department was forced to implement a new duty to intervene policy, requiring officers like Thorne to physically stop their partners if they witness constitutional violations. They also overhauled their early warning system to flag officers with statistical disparities in their stops. Julianne returned to surgery, her wrists fully healed, though the emotional scars remained. She and Thomas used a significant portion of the settlement to start a non-profit organization called the Justice Scalpel, which provides legal funding for medical professionals who are targeted by police misconduct. She continues to drive her Range Rover, refusing to be intimidated out of the life she earned. The story of the surgeon and the corrupt officer is a stark reminder of the realities that persist in our society. It serves as a case study in law schools and police academies across the nation. It highlights that success, education, and wealth are not shields against prejudice. But it also highlights the power of documentation, the importance of good men like Colonel Henderson standing up, and the ability of the justice system to work when the evidence is undeniable. So what is the valuable lesson we must take away from this story? The lesson is the vital importance of objective documentation and situational awareness. Dr. Julianne Marcus survived and triumphed not just because she was innocent, but because she and her community were prepared. She knew to record. Her neighbor knew to record. Her husband knew to document the injuries immediately. In an era where narratives can be twisted, video evidence and hard data are the ultimate equalizers. Furthermore, the lesson is about the cost of silence. For 10 years, Officer Graves racked up complaints that were ignored. Other officers stayed silent. Supervisors looked the other way. That silence eventually cost the taxpayers $5.5 million and cost a woman her peace of mind. If the system had listened to the first complaint or the 5th or the 10th, this injustice could have been prevented. We must create a culture where calling out wrongdoings is rewarded, not punished. Whether you are a bystander on a porch or a rookie in a patrol car, your voice and your camera are powerful tools for justice. Use them, know your rights, and never assume that because you have done nothing wrong, you have nothing to fear. Be prepared, be observant, and be ready to stand your ground with the truth.